Hey guys, what's going on? Blaine back for another Netflix review, and today I'm going to be talking about A Week Away. Out of all the original films that Netflix has planned to release so far this year, I can't say that I expected a Christian musical to be one of them, and a bad one at that. It's not necessarily the idea that a Christian musical is bad by itself, but when you hear the words Christian and musical put together, there's an immediate negative stigma that comes associated with it, and this movie does no favors trying to get rid of that stigma. Anyway, the movie is about a teenage delinquent named Will, and we see him running away from police officers, a car is chasing after him, he has a guitar case in his hand, so we're immediately led to believe that, oh, okay, he stole a guitar and he's gonna get arrested for it. And then Will gets taken to the police station and he gets questioned by the chief, and it turns out that he actually stole a police car as opposed to the guitar, and when I heard that, I was like, okay. That just seemed to come out of nowhere to me. It's like we didn't see him drive the car or drive anything for that matter. He was just literally running away from the cops, and the only evidence we had to take from that situation was the fact that he was running with a guitar. Yet somehow we're supposed to believe he stole a cop car? Apparently Will has had many run-ins like this with the law in the past, and this is apparently going to be the last straw for him, as the police chief is just about to sign him up to go to juvie, but he also gets the opportunity to spend a week away at a Christian summer camp program with a host family. And Will acts like such an idiot in this scene. He's like, oh, I'm not really a summer camp person. It's like, dude, you're about to get sent to one of the worst places a teenager could possibly go. Why would you choose that over 1 week at a summer camp? It's not that big a deal. Will hems and haws at it for a few seconds and eventually comes to his senses and decides that the summer camp program wouldn't be such a bad idea after all. And then the movie kicks it into high gear from there and just immediately goes overboard with all the music that it plays. Being that this is supposed to be a musical film, I fully and completely understand that there's supposed to be a certain number of tracks and performances present to balance out the rest of the story material, but they went way too far with how many songs they put in this movie. It just seemed like the movie couldn't go 2 minutes without having a song or some sort of dance act playing in the background, and at times the movie will take a random break from the song that they're in the middle of playing, and then they'll have characters talking and interacting with each other for about 30 seconds, and then all of a sudden the song starts up again. This was the case in particular for the first song in the movie, when Will and his host family are leaving the chief's room at the police station. The song just goes on forever. It feels like it takes at least 5 minutes for it to finish, and the whole time it's going through, it's just stopping and starting whenever characters are talking, and whenever we think it's over, it starts up again. It's like, come on, just get it over with. Once Will gets to the summer camp, he's immediately introduced to his love interest of the movie, Avery, and I just have to say, the way those two met up is so cliche. They just lock eyes with each other in the middle of a crowd, and it's like love at first sight. I just couldn't stop groaning at that part. Will is also introduced to Sean in this scene, who's the main antagonist of this movie, if you can call him an antagonist. Honestly, he's probably the most milquetoast, vanilla, sanitized version of a villain that you could think of. He's just an average dude who loves narwhals, and he's not even really that nasty to other characters in the movie. He just more or less looks down on Will simply for having a criminal record. As I mentioned before, Will has a host family that he stays with at the summer camp, and he spends the most time with this boy named George, who has a crush on another female character in the same way that Will does with Avery. But the way that they handled it with George was just so dumb and weird and just not right. I don't know what it is with how teenage characters are written sometimes in terms of how they react whenever their crush is nearby, but whenever George is nearby this girl Presley, who's Avery's best friend, whenever he's near her, he just acts like a complete buffoon. As soon as Presley is within George's presence, he immediately averts his gaze from her like he's Medusa. And whenever he is forced to have a conversation with her, he's always shy and stuttering his voice and always looking away from her the whole time. I just couldn't wait for them to stop talking to each other. In fact, George and Presley even have a song together talking about this sort of thing in terms of how they have trouble expressing their feelings for each other. But the whole time, they're singing right next to each other. They're completely confessing to each other within arm's length. It's like, how do you not know you guys are in love? I mean, come on, guys. If you're wondering why it's taken me this long to talk about the Christian side of things, by the way, because after all, this is a Christian musical, it's because there's not really all that much of a Christian aspect to it. Sure, there's a lot of references to Christianity and God in the many songs that are present in the movie, but in terms of the actual summer camp environment they're taking place in, there's not really all that many activities that are religious, if you could call them that. There's nothing in the way of crosses, or Bibles, or prayer sessions, or anything like that. Any references to God and Christianity all take place purely in the dialogue and in the song numbers. And from what I read about this movie after having watched it, it seems that the soundtrack side of things wasn't all that focused on Christianity to begin with either. It seems that there were only 3 or maybe 4 original songs that were written purely for this movie, and then the rest of the soundtrack is mostly just rewritten and reorchestrated versions of already existing songs that were made to include the theme of God in them. This movie just feels completely haphazard in terms of its approach to Christian themes and promoting good behavior in teenagers, which there's absolutely nothing wrong with, don't get me wrong. There's nothing wrong with having a Christian movie exist like this, but it just feels so lazy and cliche in the way everything is all put together. And like I already said, there are so many songs in this movie, it just totally assaults your senses. There was more than one occasion when watching this movie that I had to take a break just because I was so irritated at having to hear constant singing all the time. The whole romance that happened between Will and Avery in this movie, if you can call it that, felt completely underbaked. It's a Christian movie, so you're not going to see anything too risque, but I expected that there would have been a bit more development in this area. Most of the time, they're not really doing anything other than sitting at a lake and having deep conversations or something like that, or they might doing the same thing while walking and talking. There might be a scene here or there where they're holding their hands or something like that, but that's about it. They don't really kiss until towards the end of the movie. And the way that kiss happens, by the way, is so stupid. Will ends up running away from the camp whenever he gets inevitably exposed for his criminal behavior by Sean, and Avery's running after him, trying to convince him to come back, but he's having none of it. He wants to run away and forget about being there, and they have a whole argument in the middle of the street, only for him to go back to the camp 5 minutes later after having a change of heart, and she kisses him, completely forgives him like nothing ever happened. And I was just like, what? The movie's dialogue was just so cringeworthy. There were so many scenes where I couldn't stop groaning just at the things that were coming out of these characters' mouths, with the exception of one character. I was surprised to see David Cockner in this movie. I don't remember his character's name, but basically he's the guy in charge of managing the summer camp program. Out of all the characters in this movie, he was by far the biggest saving grace out of all of them. No pun intended. The biggest highlight that I can think of that he's in is whenever he's helping to initiate everyone into teams to begin the summer camp games, and he's dressed up in full Braveheart gear and he's just acting like a complete lunatic and quoting the movie. I don't know what this has to do with the Christian musical and the themes behind it, but it's hilarious and it made me worth it enough for me to keep watching. A part of me wants me to be nicer to this movie because clearly I'm not in the demographic that it's targeted toward, but I just did not enjoy watching this movie. It just feels like a lazy rehash of High School Musical and any other sort of teen school-related musical that you can think of, and the themes relating to Christianity are so lazily implemented that they may as well not have been put in to begin with. The only type of audience I could think of that would remotely enjoy watching this movie are people of faith who want something safe to show to their children, and this movie is perfectly fine. There's nothing in the way of anything that you would consider risque, and any sort of criminal activity that is referenced is pretty tame in comparison to what could have been there. It's just simply stealing. I'm not a person of faith myself, so I may be a bit biased against this movie to begin with, but I would imagine that there are still many other better options that you could pick and choose to watch than this one. Its heart is definitely in the right place, but it's so lazy with its use of characters, soundtrack, and especially Christian themes that I just couldn't get behind it. Anyways, guys, that's going to wrap up my review of A Week Away. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, stay tuned for the next part, where next time I review the Indian dramedy, Pagglate. Bye-bye.